A man who could make the entire city stop with a single phone call could not make his own daughter stop crying. He was the most powerful man in the city, but in that bright, loud supermarket, he was just a helpless father. His little girl, Joanna, was on the floor, screaming. The lights were too bright, the sounds were too loud, and the people just stared and judged. He was failing her. Then, just as a kind young employee calmed his daughter down, her bully of a manager stormed over, called the little girl a spoiled brat, and grabbed the employee's arm. In that second, the helpless father disappeared, and the Mafia boss took his place. Let me take you back to where it all began. But first of all, welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're listening, hooked, and already enjoying the story, please hit subscribe. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love seeing our community around the world. Tomorrow I'm dropping another sweet story, so don't miss it. And the first 4 people to comment with their real names will be featured in our next story. Now, let's continue. It all started with the lights. To David Patterson, the supermarket was just a place. It smelled like floor wax and cold vegetables. But to his 6-year-old daughter, Joanna, it was a room full of monsters. David ran the city's underworld with an iron fist. His name was spoken in whispers. If he wanted a building, he got it. If he wanted a politician to change their vote, they did. He was a man of complete and total control. But in aisle 5, under the humming fluorescent lights, he was not in control. Joanna was on the cold, dirty floor. Her hands were pressed so hard over her ears that her knuckles were white. She was screaming. It was not a "I want candy" scream. It was a scream of pure, raw pain. You see, Joanna was autistic, and for her, this supermarket was a nightmare. The endless beep, beep, beep of the registers was like a nail in her head. The squeak of a nearby cart was like a knife. And the lights were screaming, a high-pitched hum that David could barely hear. But for Joanna, it was a physical attack. "Joanna," David said, his voice soft. He knelt beside her in his perfect $1,000 suit. "Sweetheart, let's go home. Daddy's here." He reached out a hand. "No," she shrieked, scrambling away from his touch. The world stopped to watch. Cart squeaked to a halt. An older woman, Mrs. Gable, peered over her glasses. "Disgraceful," she muttered, just loud enough for David to hear. "Some people just can't control their children." Another woman, a young mother named Sarah, held her own baby tight. She looked at David with pity. That was worse. He could handle their fear. He could handle their hate. But he could not stand their pity. David felt a cold, dark anger rise in his chest. He was a man who solved problems. But he couldn't solve this. He was just a father, failing his little girl in public. "Joanna, please," he begged, his voice cracking. Then, a new person stepped into the aisle. She was a young woman, maybe 22, in the store's red and white uniform. Her name tag said Rosemarie. She wasn't looking at David. She wasn't looking at the judging crowd. She was only looking at Joanna. Rosemarie Navarre knew this scene. She lived it. Her own little brother, Leo, was autistic. She didn't see a bad kid. She saw her brother. She saw pain. She walked over and knelt, not too close, just enough to be seen. She didn't speak to David. She spoke to Joanna. "It's too loud, isn't it?" Rosemarie whispered. Joanna's cries hitched. It was a new voice, a quiet one. Rosemarie slowly reached into the pocket of her red apron. She pulled out a small, worn stuffed fox. It was brown and orange, and one of its button eyes was loose. "This is Fiver," Rosemarie said, her voice barely a breath. "He doesn't like the loud sounds either. He's very brave. You can hold him if you want." She didn't push the fox at the girl. She just held it out, her hand steady and calm. Joanna's eyes, squeezed shut, opened a tiny crack. She saw the fox. Her little, shaking hand slowly uncurled from her ear. At the same time, Rosemarie looked up at the wall. She saw the light switch panel, the one marked stocking. She knew she wasn't supposed to touch it. Her manager, Mr. Henderson, would have her head. She didn't care. She reached up and clicked the switch. The bright, humming lights in aisle 5 went out. They were replaced by the softer, dimmer safety lights. The terrible, buzzing hum vanished. In the sudden, gentle dark, Joanna let out a long, shuddering breath. Her whole body seemed to melt. Her small hand darted out and grabbed the stuffed fox. She pulled it to her chest. Her sobs turned into quiet, hiccuping breaths. David Patterson felt like he could breathe for the first time in 5 minutes. He was staring at this girl, this angel in a red vest. He was about to weep with gratitude. He opened his mouth to thank her. Navarre! The voice was a roar. It smashed the new piece to pieces. A large, red-faced man in a tight suit was stomping toward them. His name tag said, Mr. Henderson, manager. He looked like a man who enjoyed yelling at people smaller than him. What in God's name do you think you're doing? Henderson yelled. He pointed a fat finger at Rosemarie. You dimmed the lights? You left your post? Are you insane? Joanna, terrified by the new, angry noise, started to cry again, burying her face in the fox. Rosemarie stood up fast. She put herself between the manager and the child. Sir, please, the child was overwhelmed, Rosemarie said, her voice shaking but firm. It's called a sensory meltdown. The lights were hurting her. I don't care what it's called, Henderson shouted, his face turning purple. I care that you are breaking store policy. You are wasting time. And you, he turned his anger on David. Get your spoiled brat out of my store. We have customers trying to shop in peace. David Patterson went very, very still. The air around him dropped 10 degrees. No one had spoken to him like that in 20 years. No one had ever called his daughter that name. Rosemarie was horrified. Sir, you can't talk to him like that. It's not her fault. She's autistic. I don't care if she's the Queen of England. Henderson spat. This isn't a hospital. And you, he said, turning back to Rosemarie, are a terrible employee. You're fired. Get your things. Now. Rosemarie's face went white. Fired? But I was just helping. I don't pay you to help. I pay you to scan groceries. Henderson was high on his own small, petty power. He felt big, yelling at this girl. I said, get out, he bellowed. And then he made his last mistake. He grabbed Rosemarie's arm, his fingers digging into her skin, and tried to drag her away. Joanna let out a high-pitched scream. That was the trigger. The helpless father was gone. David Patterson, the boss, was present. It was fast. It was so fast most people missed it. In one single, smooth, and brutally quiet motion, David stepped between them. He gripped the manager's wrist. Let her go, David said. His voice was not a shout. It was a whisper, and it was the most dangerous sound in the room. Henderson, shocked, tried to pull his arm free. Or what? He sneered. David didn't answer. He just twisted. A wet, sick snap echoed in the aisle. It was loud in the new quiet. The manager screamed. It was a high, thin sound. Nothing like his big, tough guy roar. He fell to his knees, clutching his arm to his chest. His wrist was bent at an angle that a wrist should not bend. The shoppers gasped. Mrs. Gable, the judging woman, put her hand to her mouth. David Patterson didn't even look at the man whimpering on the floor. He looked at the black security camera dome on the ceiling. He looked at it for one long second. Then his eyes moved to Rosemarie. She was staring at him, her face pale with shock. He calmly fixed his suit jacket. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple, black business card. He held it out to her. "My daughter," he said, his voice calm and even, "needs you. My car is outside. You work for me now." Rosemarie, trembling, looked at the sobbing man on the floor. She looked at the quiet, terrible man in front of her. She looked at Joanna, who was watching her, clutching the stuffed fox. David leaned down to the whimpering Mr. Henderson. "You should have been kind," he said, his voice clear for everyone to hear. "You're fired." He then gently scooped Joanna up into his arms. She was quiet now, her face tucked into his neck. He nodded once to Rosemarie. "Come." He turned and walked away. His expensive shoes made no sound on the cheap tile. He walked out of the store as if he owned it. After a second of frozen panic, Rosemarie Navarre, the girl who had just lost her job, made a decision. She tucked the black card into her apron pocket and followed him. The car was a large, black sedan. It looked like it was carved from a single piece of dark glass. The windows were so dark you couldn't see in. A man in a dark suit, built like a refrigerator, stood by the back door. He didn't blink when he saw David carrying Joanna. He didn't blink when he saw Rosemarie in her supermarket uniform. He just opened the door. Rosemarie slid inside. The leather seats were softer than any bed she'd ever slept on. The door closed with a heavy, final thud. The world outside went silent. The sounds of the parking lot, the traffic, the city, all gone. The car smelled like clean leather and, weirdly, like old books. David sat across from her, settling Joanna in his lap. The little girl, completely exhausted by it all, was already drifting to sleep, her hand still holding the stuffed fox. The car pulled away from the curb, smooth and silent as a shark. Rosemarie's heart was beating so hard she thought it would break her ribs. "What have I done?" she thought. "I just got into a car with a man who broke another man's arm. In public. Am I being kidnapped?" She looked at the man. His face was calm now. All the cold anger was gone. He just looked like a tired father. He stroked his daughter's blonde hair, his touch surprisingly gentle. "I apologize for the situation," he said, his voice low. Rosemarie swallowed. Her throat was dry. "You broke his wrist." "Yes," David said, as if he were talking about the weather. "He put his hands on you. He was cruel to my daughter. He made a bad choice." He looked up, and his eyes met hers. They were a deep, clear gray, like a winter sky. "He will not be the last bad choice he makes today." Rosemarie didn't know what that meant. She wasn't sure she wanted to. "The card you gave me," she said, her voice shaking a little. "It just says, Patterson Industries. Who are you?" David Patterson watched her for a moment. He could lie. He could say he was in construction or imports. But this girl, she hadn't lied to his daughter. She had been real. He would be real too. "My name is David Patterson," he said. "Most people in this city know who I am. I am in the business of solving problems. And my daughter," he sighed, "is my biggest problem. Not because of who she is, but because the world is not built for her. And I don't know how to fix it." He leaned forward, his eyes full of a pain she had not seen in the store. "The doctors, the therapists, they cost thousands of dollars an hour. They come to my house with their briefcases and their big empty words. They try to fix her. They try to make her normal. But you," he shook his head, "you didn't do that. You saw she was in pain and you made the pain stop. You gave her a fox. You turned off the lights. In 2 minutes, you did what no doctor has been able to do in 2 years. Why? The fear in Rosemarie's chest began to fade. It was replaced by a feeling she knew very well, the need to explain. Because I know, she said, her voice stronger now. My little brother, Leo, he's 10. He's autistic, too. He lives with me. We take care of each other. I know the signs. I know what it feels like for him. The lights, the sounds. He says it's like a fire alarm going off inside your head that you can't turn off. I did what I would do for Leo. David nodded slowly. Lived experience, he whispered. It's worth more than any degree. He sat back. The job offer is real, Ms. Navarre. I want you to be Joanna's full-time caregiver. Her support. Her friend. I will pay you 5 times what that place paid you. You and your brother will have a place to live. You will be safe. All I ask, his voice grew soft, is that you help my daughter. 5 times her salary. A place for her and Leo to live. Rosemarie thought of her tiny, crumbling apartment. She thought of the eviction notice taped to her door. This man was offering her a lifeline. A strange, dangerous lifeline, but one she needed. I'm not a therapist, Mr. Patterson, she said. Good, David replied. I've had enough therapists. I need someone who understands. Rosemarie looked down at the sleeping girl, who was hugging the stuffed fox. She saw her brother. She made her choice. Yes, she said. Okay, I'll do it. Meanwhile, back at the supermarket, Mr. Henderson was not having a good day. The flashing red and blue lights of an ambulance and 2 police cars filled the parking lot. His arm was in a temporary splint, and the pain was a hot, throbbing fire. But under the pain, a different feeling was growing, greed. He was sitting in the back of the ambulance while a police officer, Detective Miller, took his statement. Miller was a tired-looking man who had seen too much. And he just snapped it? Miller asked, writing in a small notebook. Yes, like a twig, Henderson said, his voice high with fake pain and real excitement. In front of everyone. The man is a psycho. He was in a fancy suit with a driver. He's rich, you see. And I have witnesses. That old lady, Gable. The other woman. The whole store saw it. It's all on the security cameras. Plain as day. Miller nodded. And the name on the card he gave the employee? Patterson, Henderson said, puffing out his chest. David Patterson. Probably some tech billionaire who thinks he can do whatever he wants. Detective Miller's pen stopped. He slowly looked up from his notepad. His tired eyes were suddenly very sharp. He looked at Henderson's smug, greedy face. David Patterson, Miller repeated, his voice flat. That's right, Henderson said. I want him arrested for assault. I want him thrown in jail. I'm going to own that bastard. I'm going to be rich. Detective Miller sighed. He closed his notebook. Sir, we'll look into it. You'll look into it? You get that footage. You arrest him. Miller looked at the manager, his face a mask of pity. Mr. Henderson, you should probably go to the hospital. Henderson didn't notice the change in the detective's tone. He was too busy planning how he would spend his new money. He thought he had just won the lottery. He had no idea he had just signed his own death warrant. He climbed into the ambulance, feeling like a king. In his study, a large, dark room that smelled of old books and bourbon, David Patterson made one phone call. Joanna was now asleep on a soft leather couch, the stuffed fox held to her chest. Rosemarie was in the kitchen with his housekeeper, finally eating something. David held the phone to his ear. The Marketone on 5th and Main, David said, his voice quiet. There was an incident about an hour ago. The security footage. It's a problem. The voice on the other end was gravelly and short. "It's not a problem anymore, boss." "Good," David said, and hung up. He looked at his daughter. For the first time, he felt like he might be able to fix this. He hadn't just hired an employee. He had found hope. The next 2 days were a blur for Rosemarie. She and her brother Leo were moved out of their tiny, crumbling apartment, with its noisy pipes and angry neighbors. They were moved into a beautiful little guest house on David Patterson's property. The property wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. It was a huge, old stone mansion set on acres of forest, surrounded by a high wall. The loudest sound was the wind in the trees. Leo, her 10-year-old brother, was usually a very anxious boy. He hated new places, but he walked into the small, clean house, looked at the soft carpets, and felt the deep, deep silence. He went to the window, looked out at the trees, and said one word, "Quiet." He turned to Rosemarie and gave her a rare, full smile. "I like it here, Rosie." Rosemarie felt tears sting her eyes. For the first time in their lives, they were safe. Her new job began right away. Her first act was not to teach Joanna. It was to listen. She sat in Joanna's room, which was huge and bright and looked like a perfect page from a toy catalog. David had bought her everything, the most expensive dolls, the flashiest electronic games. But the room felt cold. "Mr. Patterson," Rosemarie said to him that evening, "this room is too bright, and all these toys, they all make noise." David looked lost. "They are the highest-rated toys, the best ones." "She doesn't need high-rated," Rosemarie said gently. "She just needs comfort." For the next week, they worked. It was strange, giving orders to a man like David Patterson, but he listened. He had his men paint Joanna's room a soft, calm blue, like the sky just before night. They took out the flashing, beeping toys. Rosemarie brought in things from her own home: soft clay, blankets of different textures, and a small, padded pop-up tent. "This is her safe space," Rosemarie explained, setting up the tent in a corner. "When the world gets too loud, she can go in here. It's not a punishment. It's a tool. It gives her control." David watched. He learned. He had spent his whole life giving orders and controlling his world. Rosemarie was teaching him a new way, how to listen and how to let go. He saw his daughter, who had been a locked box to him, slowly begin to open. One afternoon, he came into the room. He was about to speak, but he stopped. Rosemarie and Joanna were sitting on the floor, not talking. They were just rolling a piece of soft blue clay back and forth between them, a quiet, simple game. As David watched, Joanna looked up at him. She didn't hide. She didn't look away. She smiled. It was a small, quick smile, but it was real. David Patterson felt his knees go weak. He had to lean against the door frame. He had faced down men with guns without flinching. But this small, simple smile from his daughter broke him open. He quietly backed out of the room. He went to his study and sat in the dark for a long time. He realized he had bought judges, politicians, and police chiefs. But this 22-year-old girl from the supermarket, she had just given him back his daughter. Mr. Henderson was not having a good week. His arm was in a heavy, itchy blue cast. The pain was constant, but worse than the pain was the silence. It had been a week. Why hadn't the police arrested that rich bastard? He stormed into the police station, his good hand balled into a fist. He slammed it on Detective Miller's desk, rattling the cold coffee cup. "A week!" Henderson shouted. "It's been a week. Why isn't he in handcuffs? I gave you a name. I gave you witnesses. What are you people doing?" Detective Miller slowly took a sip of his coffee. He looked at Henderson's file. "Sit down, Mr. Henderson." "I don't want to sit down. I want him arrested." Can't do that, Miller said, his voice flat and bored. What do you mean, you can't? I mean, Miller said, we pulled the security footage from the supermarket, just like you asked. And, Henderson said, a greedy smile spreading on his face. You see it? You see him snap my arm. Funny thing, Miller said, leaning back in his squeaky chair. The camera system in aisle 5, it was defective. Been on a 20-second loop for the past 6 months, apparently. Just shows the same old lady picking up a can of soup over and over. Henderson's face went from red to white. What? That's impossible. That's a lie. I checked those cameras last month. It gets funnier, Miller continued, clearly enjoying this. The only camera that was working perfectly was the one at the front door. And it shows you, Mr. Henderson, quite clearly, grabbing your young employee, Ms. Navarre, by the arm. Looks a lot like assault to me. She could press charges against you if she wanted. My witnesses, Henderson sputtered, his voice high and thin. Mrs. Gable. The other woman, Sarah. Ah, yes. We talked to them, Miller said, checking his notes. Mrs. Gable says she didn't get a good look. She just remembers a child was crying and that you were shouting very loudly. The other woman, Sarah, said she was too busy with her baby to see anything clearly. As far as the law is concerned, Mr. Henderson, nothing happened. You were bought, Henderson screamed, pointing his cast. He paid you off. All of you. Detective Miller stood up, his face suddenly hard. I'm going to forget you said that. Right now, all I have is your word against David Patterson's. And your word isn't worth much. Get out of my office. Henderson stumbled out onto the street. He was shaking, not just with anger, but with the first cold seed of real fear. This wasn't right. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed his lawyer. This is insane, he yelled into the phone. The cops are in on it. The footage is gone. The witnesses clammed up. What do we do now? A civil suit. We sue him. We'll make him pay. His lawyer on the other end was silent for a long, long time. Sir, Henderson said, did you hear me? I said we sue. Mr. Henderson. The lawyer's voice was a terrified whisper. You need to listen to me very, very carefully. You need to drop this. Right now. Forget this ever happened. Drop it? Are you crazy? That man is rich. He broke my arm. I'm not afraid of him. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer said, and his voice was shaking. I just got off the phone with the corporate office of Market-Owned Foods. They wanted to let you know. The company was sold. An hour ago. Sold? What does that have to do with me? It was an all-cash deal. A hostile takeover. The buyer was a private holding company. So what? Henderson barked, not understanding. The lawyer took a deep, shaky breath. The name of the holding company, Mr. Henderson, is Patterson Industries. Henderson stopped walking. The sounds of the city, the cars, the people, it all faded away. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a sickly, cold gray. The phone almost slipped from his hand. Patterson? He whispered. As in, David Patterson. Yes, his lawyer said. He didn't just make the footage disappear, Mr. Henderson. He just bought the entire supermarket chain. He just bought your job. He just bought you. My advice? Pray. And start packing your desk. 1 week later, life at the Patterson estate had a new rhythm. In the mornings, Rosemarie and Joanna would be in the garden. Rosemarie had discovered that Joanna loved the feeling of cool dirt and the rough bark of the trees. She wasn't afraid of the world, Rosemarie learned. She just needed to experience it on her own terms, without all the noise. David would watch them from his study window. He was still David Patterson, the boss. He still ran his empire with a quiet, iron will. But something in him had changed. The cold anger he always carried was still there, but it was balanced by something new. A warmth, a gratitude. Rosemarie hadn't just saved his daughter. She was saving him. She was teaching him that true strength wasn't about controlling everyone. It was about understanding one. That morning, David hung up the phone after a call with his lawyers. "It's done," the lawyer had said. The last paper was signed. He owned market-owned foods, from its 200 stores down to its last box of cheap cereal. He walked downstairs. He wasn't wearing one of his expensive suits. He was wearing dark jeans and a simple black shirt. He looked like any other man. He found Rosemarie in the kitchen, making pancakes. Joanna was at the table, humming quietly to herself as she lined up blueberries. "Rosemarie," he said. She looked up and smiled. She was no longer afraid of him. "Good morning, David. I have to run an errand," he said. "It's the last piece of business from last week." Rosemarie's smile faded a little. She knew what this was. "Is it necessary?" she asked, her voice soft. David looked at Joanna, who was carefully placing a blueberry on her stuffed fox's nose. "Some people," he said, "only learn lessons the hard way. Wait in the car. All of you, I want this finished." Mr. Henderson was having the worst day of his life. He was working. He had to. He had no other job, and the news of the company being sold had frozen all his accounts. His arm was in a black sling, the cast still heavy and awkward. He was not in his manager's office. He was on the floor in aisle 5. The new district manager had told him he had to do inventory until the new owners arrived. He was stocking shelves. It was the job he usually gave to teenagers as punishment. He was terrified. Every time the automatic doors of the supermarket whooshed open, he flinched. He was expecting, he didn't know what, lawyers? Police? Then, at 10 a.m., the doors whooshed open. In walked David Patterson. He was not in a suit. He was casual. He looked like a customer, and he was pushing a shopping cart. Henderson froze. He felt his bladder go weak. He wanted to run, but his feet were glued to the cheap tile. David didn't look at him. He just calmly pushed the cart down aisle 5. He stopped right where Joanna had been on the floor. He picked up a can of soup. He looked at the label. Then he put it in his cart. He pushed the cart past Henderson, his eyes looking straight ahead, as if Henderson was just another stack of boxes. Henderson was shaking. "What is this? Is he here to shop? Is he mocking me?" Then the doors whooshed open again. This time, 2 men in very expensive suits walked in. They were not smiling. They walked right up to Henderson. "Mr. Henderson?" the lead man in the suit said. His name was Mr. Graves, and he was David's personal lawyer. "I am the new regional director for Patterson Industries, the new parent company of market-owned foods." Henderson just nodded, his mouth dry. "Your services," Mr. Graves said, his voice flat and boring, "are no longer required. Your final paycheck is here. Please clear out your locker. Security will escort you out." This was it. The axe had fallen. Henderson was shaking with a mix of rage and pure terror. He looked past the lawyers. David Patterson was at the end of the aisle, patiently waiting, as if he were in line at the checkout. Henderson couldn't help it. The last tiny bit of his stupid, petty pride burst out. "You!" he whispered, his voice cracking. He pointed his good hand at David. "You did this. You bought the whole company. You bought a 200-store chain? Just to fire me?" The lawyers stepped back. David Patterson left his cart. He walked slowly, calmly, back down the aisle. He stopped right in front of the broken man. He was not angry. He was not smiling. He was perfectly, terrifyingly calm. "No, Mr. Henderson," David said, his voice quiet so only they could hear. "I fired you last week. When you called my daughter a brat. When you put your hands on Ms. Navarre." He leaned in just an inch. "I bought this company to make sure you never, ever get to be the big man again. You are not a manager. You are not even a clerk. You are nothing." He looked down at the arm in the sling. "I'm a man of my word. You're fired." David Patterson turned his back on the ruined man. He walked out of the store, past the lawyers, past the security guards, and into the bright sunshine. He left the shopping cart with the single can of soup in the middle of the aisle. The black sedan was waiting at the curb. The engine was running. He got into the driver's seat. In the back seat, Rosemarie was reading a picture book to Joanna. Joanna was leaning against her, her head on Rosemarie's shoulder. The little stuffed fox was held tight in her hand. She was safe. David looked at them in the rearview mirror. He saw Rosemarie look up and meet his eyes. She gave him a small, sad smile. She didn't like this, but she understood it. He was the most feared man in the city. He was a mafia boss. He was a man.
Thank you for listening all the way. Your support means everything. Subscribe, leave a comment with your real name and where you're from, and you might see your shout out in the next story. You never know, the next one might just change your life.